Story 1. My name is Jack, and this is a story my old friend Lucas told me countless times, something that happened to him many years back. I recently asked him to put the whole thing into writing, and with his permission, I'm sharing it here. I've always found it deeply unnerving. Lucas wasn't the kind of man you doubted. In his 50s, broad-shouldered, skin-lined, and darkened from decades spent in salt air, he carried the weight of experience in every word. He made his living in marine salvage and coastal repair. If something broke along the shoreline, he was the guy they sent. But he wasn't just a contractor. Lucas had been a diver, a ship mechanic, even spent time doing government inspections offshore. He'd seen nearly everything you could imagine, so when this story came from him, I didn't question it. Not once. The property had been passed to the county years earlier, and no one knew what to do with it. Developers wanted it gone, historians wanted it preserved, but no one wanted to spend the money. Lucas's task was simple: go out there alone, inspect it inside and out, and determine if it was worth restoring. The lighthouse sat on a barren rock island about an hour off the mainland. The island itself was nothing much, a lump of stone no more than 300 feet across, with only the tower, a generator shed, and some rusted scaffolding clinging to it. It hadn't been used in decades, wasn't open to visitors, and didn't even have a dock, just a ledge where a Coast Guard boat could drop someone at high tide. He traveled light: 4 days of food, a sleeping bag, his tools, notes, and a two-way marine radio. The plan was straightforward: land on Monday morning, finish by Wednesday, call for pickup on Thursday. Going alone didn't bother him. He'd done that sort of work many times. When he arrived, the place was dead quiet. It was cold, overcast, and still. The air carried that familiar mix of rust, salt, and rot that clings to abandoned coastal places. The lighthouse, built in the early 1900s, rose about 50 feet. Inside, it had the typical spiral staircase winding up to the beacon room. The old Fresnel lens hadn't been lit in decades, but the structure itself seemed steady. Lucas did his usual checks: beams, stairs, windows, all sound. The lower floorboards were warped but usable. The second level, a storage room, was empty save for rusting cabinets. The third floor had once been a sleeping quarter, long abandoned. Lucas decided to lay his bag on the ground floor, near the generator room where it was warmer. His first night was uneventful. Too uneventful, he said. You don't realize how loud the world usually is until silence takes over. No gulls, no insects, no surf slapping rocks. Just the faint wind. The second day brought heavy fog. When he woke, the outside world was a wall of white. You couldn't see more than a few feet through it. Lucas had seen fog plenty, but this was thicker than anything before, solid, almost unnatural. Still, he went on with his inspection, working in the upper stairwell. That's when the first odd thing happened. Halfway up, there was a small maintenance closet built into the wall. On day one, it had been sealed shut by rusted hinges. Now, it was cracked open an inch. He figured maybe the damp air had shifted it. But when he opened it wider, he saw something in the back corner. A wooden box, about the size of a lunch pail, covered in damp moss, like it had been dragged from the ocean. He didn't touch it, just closed the door and made a note. That night, something disturbed his sleep. He said it wasn't exactly a sound, more like the absence of sound, as if everything had stopped. Then came footsteps on the spiral stairs above him. At first, he thought it was an animal, until he realized they weren't coming down, they were going up. He switched on his flashlight and fixed his eyes on the stairwell opening, waiting. Nothing appeared. The sound eventually ceased. Silence returned. By daylight, he scoured the entire tower. Every floor, every closet, even the roof. Nothing. Except the box. It was no longer in the closet. It now sat halfway out into the stairwell, moss clinging to it. Lucas hesitated for a long time, then picked it up. It was heavy, waterlogged, the lid nailed shut. He left it by the base of the stairs and went outside. That's when he noticed more. There were footprints in the dirt, bare, wet feet. Not boots, not shoes. Just a dozen or so human impressions, leading from the north side of the lighthouse straight to the cliff's edge, and stopping. No return prints. Just a trail that ended at a vertical drop into the sea. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had come ashore. But no boats were scheduled until his pickup, and he was certain of it. He considered calling for early extraction, but knew in such fog a boat wouldn't find the island. He locked every door, jammed the stairwell shut with an iron pipe, and tried to rest. That night was worse. Around 1:30 a.m., the beacon room door above slammed shut with such force that dust drifted from the ceiling. Then came 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, against the inner wall of the tower itself. Not the door, not a window, the wall. Like someone was standing inside the brickwork, tapping. He lay frozen until morning. When he checked again, the box was gone, and the closet stood wide open. That was enough. Lucas radioed for immediate pickup, claiming a medical emergency. The fog was still dense, but they promised to send a boat in a few hours. He packed his things and waited near the ledge. The fog never lifted. If anything, it grew worse. He sat all day in the cold white haze. As the sun went down, he heard footsteps again, behind him on the gravel by the tower. But when he spun around, there was no one. Or maybe they were just hidden in the fog. He ran to the cliff's edge and stayed there until the sound of a boat horn finally cut through. He was pulled aboard after dark. The deckhand who helped him up asked why he looked so rattled. Lucas just said the lighthouse was unsafe and should be sealed. His report back at the office was brief. Structurally compromised, unsafe to enter. He never wrote about the footsteps or the box. He told me later he left those out because maybe, just maybe, it was all in his head from isolation. That was the end of the written account he gave me. Lucas never returned to that island. Within a year, he stopped taking field work altogether. Said he'd rather stick to dry land. When I asked if it was because of the lighthouse, he only shrugged and said he'd seen enough. I pushed once, asking what he really thought had happened. He looked straight at me and said words that have stayed with me since. Some places aren't meant to be disturbed. They just need silence and time. That was all he offered. Later, I tried digging for more. The coordinates he noted didn't match any known lighthouse. County records mention a decommissioned tower off the coast, but no official name, no history available. It's as if the place doesn't exist. That unsettles me most. Not what Lucas told me, but the silence of everyone else. I still don't know if I hope he imagined it, or if I hope he didn't. Story 2. My cousin Daniel has been in the Coast Guard for over 10 years. He's not the type to exaggerate or spin tailies. He's one of the most honest, no-nonsense people I know. Level-headed, practical, not drawn to ghost stories or anything supernatural. Just a guy who likes the sea and routine. He told me this account in the summer of 2022, and I made him go over it several times because of how disturbing it was. Each time, the details matched exactly. It goes back to 2017, when he was stationed at a lighthouse off the coast of Maine for a 2-week maintenance assignment. The location was Matinicus Rock, way out in the Atlantic. You can only reach it by boat or by helicopter. The island is nothing but sharp rock, a single tower, and a shed used for fuel and supplies. No power grid, no plumbing, hardly any reception. The beacon itself is automated, but it still needs human upkeep, which is why crews are sent out every so often. Normally, it's a one-man duty, but after some unexplained electrical failures the previous year, they sent 2 people this time, Daniel and another serviceman named Russell. For the first few days, everything was routine. windy, dull, repetitive. Their daytime jobs included testing the light, checking backup batteries, refueling the generator, and scraping off layers of corroded salt. Nights were quiet. They ate, read, played cards, and passed the hours. The isolation was expected, nothing unusual. On the fourth night, though, Daniel woke up around 2 a.m. with a strange sensation. Not pain, not sickness, just that the air felt wrong. He compared it to the heavy tension before a storm, except the sky was clear and calm. He sat upright and immediately noticed something out of place. The lighthouse beacon wasn't turning. That light is critical, always supposed to sweep across the horizon, and its failure was no small issue. He roused Russell, and together they climbed the spiral stairs to the top. When they reached the beacon room, they saw the gears were running, but the lens was stuck. Something had jammed it. A dark, sodden piece of fabric wedged into the mechanism, like a coat or blanket. It was slimy, dripping with moss, and stank like rotted seaweed. Neither of them understood how it got there. The doors were bolted, the windows sealed, and there was no way wind or birds could have carried it inside. They pulled it free, threw it out into the wind, and went back downstairs, chalking it up as some weird accident. But the next night, around the same hour, the light failed again. When they checked, another cloth was stuck in the gears. This time, not a blanket, but a small, old-fashioned scarf. It was red, frayed at the edges, and soaked with seawater. Tiny shells and barnacles still clung to it, as though it had been dragged fresh from the ocean. That was when the coincidences stopped feeling random. They searched everything, doors, windows, storage, all locked tight. But now the thought crept in. Maybe someone was tampering with the beacon, or worse, something was inside the tower with them. From then on, they barricaded the stairwell each night with heavy crates. They locked the beacon room and sealed the ground entrance carefully. Still, on the seventh night, something happened Daniel won't even try to explain. He said he was lying in bed when he heard Russell murmuring. Not to him, but to the corner of the room, as if someone was standing there. Daniel asked what he was saying. Russell blinked, dazed, and claimed he hadn't spoken a word. Later that night, Daniel woke again to find Russell sitting at the window, staring out at the rocks. When Daniel pressed him, Russell said he thought he had seen a figure standing there the previous night, just barely illuminated by the sweep of the light, and then gone the moment the beam passed. After that, Russell deteriorated. He hardly slept, rarely spoke, and sat at the window for hours. When Daniel tried checking in, Russell muttered about hearing things. Noises inside the walls, whispers on the stairs. On the ninth night, they both heard it. Footsteps, not creaks, not the wind. Real, steady steps descending from the beacon room. Daniel looked over to see Russell frozen at the foot of the stairs, staring upward. Daniel asked if he'd gone up. Russell said no. Daniel hadn't either. They stood still, listening until the sound stopped. The silence afterward felt worse than the noise itself. That night, they shoved a dresser against the bedroom door and slept clutching knives. On the 11th night, the beacon failed once more. When they rushed up, the beacon room door wasn't just ajar. It was blown wide open. Inside, the light wasn't merely jammed. It had been dismantled. The bulb itself had been unscrewed and placed upright in the middle of the floor. That bulb is massive and industrial, not something you can twist off casually. Daniel froze, shaken, while Russell muttered that someone had done it deliberately. Then Daniel felt a chill against his back, like a hand brushing him. He spun around, but no one was there. Russell had gone pale, pointing at the wall and whispering that he saw a hand push out from the stone itself. They bolted downstairs and locked themselves in their quarters. Daniel didn't sleep at all. Russell sat rocking, mumbling to someone invisible. By morning, Daniel grabbed the emergency satellite phone and demanded pickup, claiming major mechanical problems. The boat came later that day, but the strangest part came when the crew mentioned a distress call they had received at 2:12 a.m. Daniel swore he hadn't touched the phone until daylight. But the crew insisted they'd gotten a garbled message filled with static, a voice saying something about not being alone out there, before cutting off. Russell stayed silent the entire ride back. Within months, he quit the Coast Guard for good and never spoke of the assignment again. Daniel still serves, still does lighthouse maintenance on occasion, but he says he'll never return to Matinicus Rock. Story 3. This took place during the COVID lockdowns, right around the stage where everyone was going stir-crazy from being trapped inside with nothing to do. I was single at the time, and most nights I would just scroll through Tinder or Instagram while binge-watching shows. Because honestly, what else could you do during lockdown evenings? That's when I struck up a conversation with a girl I'd followed on Instagram for years. Her name was Sophia, though she went by Soph. We both lived in Suffolk County, Long Island, not far from the Hamptons, and about an hour from Montauk. One night, we were bored and decided to hang out. She only lived 5 minutes from me, which was super convenient, so I picked her up. We went for a drive to a nearby park, which was closed, and sat there drinking White Claws. Right away, I caught the vibe that she was kind of rebellious, but in a fun way. She didn't mind trespassing, hopping fences, or doing stuff like that. We connected really fast, and less than an hour in, she suggested driving all the way out to Montauk to do the cliff walk near the lighthouse. Technically, the lighthouse grounds closed at sunset. With lockdowns, it might have been completely shut, but I wasn't sure. Still, I immediately agreed. I liked spontaneous adventures like that. So we finished our drinks and drove east toward Montauk Point. When we got there, Soph told me to park in the lighthouse lot. I hesitated, but she was confident no security would be around on a random Tuesday night during off-season lockdown. Since the lot was empty, I trusted her. She claimed she'd been there before, even pre-COVID. We parked, cracked open another White Claw, and sat there a bit. I kept nervously scanning the lot for security while she just told me to chill. Eventually, we walked toward the lighthouse. Seeing it lit up so close at night was surreal beautiful, but eerie at the same time. There's something liminal about it I can't quite describe. Soph led the way along a side route that avoided the main entrance, probably so we wouldn't walk straight into the light beam. It was my first time ever seeing Montauk Lighthouse in person. She guided us toward the cliffside trail behind it, known as the Cliff Walk. It was a path made up of rocks right along the water. We only had our flashlights to guide us. Maybe there were supposed to be lamps, but that night, everything was dark except for the entrance lights and the beacon itself. We carefully made our way, when suddenly Soph, now walking behind me, called my name. I turned, and she was pointing her flashlight behind us, revealing someone else on the rocks. When we both shined our beams, we could see him more clearly. He wore a hooded coat, head down, looked like a black guy, though we couldn't guess his age. I nervously called out, asking if he worked there. He stayed silent, unmoving. I asked again, thinking maybe he was security and we'd get in trouble. But then he finally spoke. Realizing he wasn't a guard, but just some random man didn't make me feel better. It made everything worse. Why was this guy creeping around back here? Why was he tailing us? I motioned for Soph to keep moving. I let her go in front, and we pressed forward. The man started walking too. He didn't say anything else, just kept pace with us. Every so often, Soph or I would glance back, and he was always the same distance behind. It was the most unsettling thing, turned the whole adventure into pure tension. When we reached the end of the trail, we cut through the grass toward the car. He was still following, mirroring our speed. That's when he shouted something at us. It sounded like, "Where are you going?" His tone was off, like he was trying to provoke us. I told Soph to ignore him, and we kept moving quickly. Then we realized two more guys were approaching from behind. I didn't want to sprint and trigger a chase, but one of them yelled something I couldn't make out. By the time we reached the car, all three were right on top of us. We both screamed when we realized how close they were. I locked the doors immediately, just seconds before two of them tugged at the handles. Throwing the car in reverse, the only safe direction, I backed out fast. They hit and kicked the car as I pulled away, but once we were moving, they didn't chase. On the drive back, our hearts were pounding, and once the adrenaline wore off, we both went quiet. I dropped her off, and that was the end of the night. Soph and I hung out a lot afterward, and we still keep in touch today. But that experience shook me badly. It was way too close to becoming something worse. Some of my friends think those guys were gang members, maybe Crips. Whatever the case, I'm never going back there at night again.